Welcome to the Unshakable Foundation's meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Howard E., who's come to share on the topic of My Shakey Foundation for up to 40 minutes, after which we will open up for the Q&A portion of the meeting. Howard, it's over to you. Thank you.
You're on mute, Howard.
You may regret that, but okay. My name is Howard Ebert, and I am an addict, definitely a cocaine addict and everything else you got. Thank you, Young, for inviting me. Thank all my friends for showing up here. Always love when I see members of my family in the audience. It's just, I feel at home. I feel at home. I love CA. I have to say it every time I share at a CA meeting because you guys get it. You know, it's not about whether I drink it, swallow it, snort it, smoke it, shoot it, shove it. My motto was wet or dry, just get me high. And you guys understand that. You know that it's not the name on the chemical. It's the name on the birth certificate. And I never have to explain that at a CA meeting. I love at the beginning when you guys have, in the initial reading, that states you don't even have to have tried cocaine. How inviting, inclusive that is. I've been around since 1983, and I've been told more than my share of times at AA meetings that I don't belong there. Fortunately, I have thick skin and wide shoulders, and I don't let that bother me. But for those of you who are new, maybe you're a little thin-skinned, don't let that scare you off. You have a home right here in CA. And it wasn't always like that. When I started going to CA meetings back in the early 80s, CA was just NA with a tie. It made me feel different. It made me feel better than, because we didn't shoot our drugs. We snorted these things. It was not a comfortable place to be. The complete opposite of what it is now. So I'm not going to continue to harp on CA. You guys get it. You guys know it because you're here. My Shakey Foundation, I don't know where that came from. It's just that it sums it up so well for me. I've celebrated 10-year anniversaries several times in recovery. There aren't too many people who could make that statement and still be here. Give you a little bit of background. I was raised in a semi-conservative Jewish home in New York. I had to go to Hebrew school for religious training every day after regular school from 3:30 to 5:30 from the ages of 9 to 14. I had to be in Hebrew school for this religious training, and I hated it. And I resented my parents for sending me there. And I learned way before I got to AA, I learned that God does not set too harsh terms with those who seek him, because Hebrew school and churches and all these other places are filled with the harsh terms that people make, that religions make. God didn't do that. I don't know why it took me so long in recovery to grasp the fact that religion was different than spirituality. Religion is a set of practices. I had to go all those years to learn all of those practices, and I retained none of them because they don't mean anything to me. But it's a set of practices. You want to belong to our club and worship our imaginary best friend? Well, this is what you have to do. Spirituality is none of that. Spirituality is just, we have a discipline. You have to have a discipline for God and certain other spiritual things like prayer and meditation. But the definition of that is left up to you. How free is that? How liberating is that? Man, I wish I knew that a long time ago. I wish I knew that when I first came in here. It took me 24 years in recovery on a very shakable foundation to realize that was my unshakable foundation. But I had to learn the hard way. So as I said, I had to go to Hebrew school, was force-fed all of this religious nonsense. And I didn't have a real good relationship with God when I was younger. You see, my mom died when I was 14 after a lengthy bout with cancer, and I watched her disappear before my eyes. And when she passed, she left my brother, who was 9, and I. And when I asked my dad why would God do such a thing? He said, well, God must have needed her very much. And I thought, that is so cruel. That is mean, unjust, unfair. And I wanted no part of anything that would have anything to do with that. Plus, around the same time, I had a cousin who was a big brother figure to me, who between the ages of when I was like 9 and 13 sexually molested me. So when I think of God allowing those things to happen to me, no, I'm off the God bus. It's not something I want to get involved with. But when I was 16, I had my first experience with mind mood altering substances. And this should probably come as no surprise to anyone here who's experimented with LSD. I experienced God. Flash. On LSD, you can see God. And I really believed I did. I believed I made that contact. And so afterwards, I went searching for that source, that power, without having to take the hallucinogen. And I knew I wouldn't find it in synagogues, but I went to churches. I went to mosques. I lived in the city, so I was able to go to the Church of Krishna Consciousness. You know, the guys with the long gowns and the finger symbols and the schwanz on their head. And that didn't work for me because I believe God creates us in his own image. And I know he wouldn't dress like that and he wouldn't wear his hair like that. So that didn't work for me. But everywhere I went, there were these rules and guidelines, and it just didn't work for me. If this were a movie, it'd probably be like a title card that came up that would say New York, 1983, March 1983. I was living on a steady diet of intravenous cocaine and Jack Daniels. I weighed about 80 pounds. My skin was gray and translucent. My arms looked like a battlefield in Beirut. And I suddenly had a moment of clarity where I realized I was no longer afraid of dying. I survived too many attempted suicides. Every time I got high, I intentionally did that, and I survived it. So I believed I was bulletproof. But I realized I was also not afraid of dying, not as afraid as I was of going on another day like I was going. So I asked my dad, for the first time I ever asked him for help. And he brought me to a specialist in alcohol and drug addiction who had me admitted to a facility in Connecticut. And they brought me to the anonymous rooms, and nothing in my life has been the same since. Now, when I first came into recovery, everybody told me, you got to change. You got to change. You got to change. You got to have faith. You got to have faith. And I thought, well, I don't have that. So what else do you have in that bag of tricks? Because I don't have the faith. Plus, when you say change, what do you mean? Well, they told me people, places, and things. So I thought, that's easy. I moved up here from New York. I'm here in the hills of Connecticut. I have no plans, no intentions of ever going back to New York other than to maybe visit my family. I was relocating to Connecticut, so I had, in one move, knocked out 3 steps because the book tells me I'm now at step 3, that I have to change all those things, and I already did. So where do we go from here? And I realized that, it wasn't about changing those things. It was about so much more than that. As I said, I relapsed several times. I celebrated 10-year anniversaries more than once. And, every time I relapsed, there were certain signs that I totally ignored, that I totally missed. I would get to a point where, as Bill says, I was making heavy going of life. Everything was a challenge. I was crawling out of my skin. I wasn't drinking or I wasn't drugging, and I was a raw nerve. I was overly critical, judgmental, brutally sarcastic. And of course, how am I going to have relationships with other people if that's the way that I was? So obviously, I started to have difficulty with personal relationships, and I started to feel like a fraud. I really did. I couldn't control my emotional nature. I was a prey to depression and misery, and all the things that come after that. And every relapse that I had was preceded by my disease going underground. That anything I could attach myself to for relief, anything that I could do to create the feeling, to create the illusion, to create the lie that I was in control, I'm going to attach myself to. And it didn't matter whether it was, could be food sprees. I gained 20 to 40 pounds before I relapsed each time. And I know most people lose weight, but I don't. I stuffed myself. Shopping. Oh man, shopping and collections. I spent incredible amounts of money that I did not have, on all kinds of collections. And when it came to clothes, it was worse than anything else, because if I liked the shirt, I had to have every color that it came in. I had to have the matching tie, pocket square, and suspenders to go with it. I had to have the jacket and the shoes to go with it. I had to have all of that in every combination, most of which never got worn. But I was in a business where you had to dress every day, so I dressed with like some of that. But the point was, I had all of these collections, CDs, DVDs, concert merchandise. I still have tons of that crap in my closet, and I've tried to sell it. And the things that I think are valuable are of no use, no value to anybody else. Who cares that it's the first edition of the Beatles single that has a certain number on the label? Nobody cares. I thought I cared, but nobody else seems to care to the point of wanting to spend any money to buy it from me. But the point was, I had gotten to the point in sobriety each time where I understood suicide. Now, one of the things I noticed in the last few years is how many of us, when we come back for what hopefully is our last go around, we come in on the heels, on the verge of suicide. Now, I was never suicidal. I know I tried to kill myself, but it was just another thing. But this time I understood it. I knew how you could hurt so deep and so much and feel that there's just nothing that's going to relieve that seems like a viable solution. So I would go to meetings and I would share about that. And I can't tell you how many times after doing it at meetings, people would walk right by me after the meeting as if I hadn't just confessed to having thoughts of suicide. Nothing. Or worse yet, they'd walk by me, pat me on the shoulder. And what do you think they said? Keep coming, pal. It gets better. And I thought, if that's the best you can do, is a silly platitude and a pat on the shoulder, you are officially out of ideas. You've got nothing to offer me. But somebody did get through. On my last time through, somebody did get through. But I want to just kind of back up a little bit, because I said something about these foundations, these Unshakable foundations. When I first came into recovery, somebody told me, don't drink, go to meetings. That's all you have to do. And that's all I did. That was the foundation of my recovery, fellowship. And in the 80s, that wasn't unusual. Nobody was talking about the book, certainly not in any place that I would go. Yeah, it's a shingle on the wall, but for all I knew, it was just covering up a hole in the wall, because nobody ever seemed to pay any attention to it. So that was my unreliable, ineffective higher power, was the fellowship of Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous, and to some extent CA. But in my 7th year, my first wife, got very sick. She eventually passed away after many years of suffering, but there was a lot of pain medication around my home. And I went from 5 meetings a week for 7 years down to 0 overnight. Like Andy Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption, I disappeared like a fart in the wind. I was just gone. And I somehow managed to stay clean for 3 more years, but I decided to celebrate my 10th anniversary by treating myself to some of my wife's pain meds, and I was off to the races. I finally admitted what was going on, went back into treatment, and when I came back, someone told me, if you get a firm foundation in the first 3 steps, you'll never have to use again. And that became my new foundation, that if I just kept my eye on, I have no power, there is a power, and I'm going to search out that power, I don't have to do anything else. My program was 1, 2, 3, 12. That was my foundation. Obviously, extremely shaky, but that's what it was. And after 10 years of doing that, I got really sick. And the doctor said, we're going to have to put you on pain meds for a year, but don't worry. We know your history. We know your background. We'll support you. We'll wean you when the time comes. And, I was so sick. I just let him do it, never thinking for a minute that there was ever any force on earth that was ever able to tell me when it was time to stop. So when the year came and they started to wean me, I started to doctor shop, steal my wife's pain meds. Anybody's house I went into, I was in their bathroom, in their medicine cabinet within a blink of an eye. I did all those things, and I kept it all secret. When I finally lost what I thought was the best job I ever had at the time, I got honest, went into treatment, and in January of 2006, I came back. But I was broken. I just felt, you have nothing to offer me anymore. I no longer had any belief. When I came in, I didn't have faith, but I had belief, because belief is hope. And I had lots and lots of hope. But after being beaten down, in my mind, beaten down over several relapses over 24 years, I didn't even have that hope anymore. But I would share it at meetings. I knew to go to meetings because that's all I knew. So I'm going to go back and try another unreliable foundation of going to meetings, and I'd share that stuff, and nobody would pay attention to it. But somebody did. Someone did get through. A newcomer, less than a year sobriety. It was his first time in, and he started talking to me about these tapes that he was listening to of these guys from the Ozarks, Joe and Charlie, and how they changed his life, how he got involved with the workshop group in our community, of no less, how it was there, and I never knew about it, but it was. And I thought, well, look, if it works for you, that's great. But I can't tell you how many step meetings and book meetings I've been to over the years, and I never got that result. But he was relentless. He was one of those textbook guys that sunk his fetlocks into me, and he was not letting go. He went to meetings he never went to before just because I would be there. He was always telling me the latest thing he heard on the tape and so on. And he finally said, look, Howard, I know you're not working. Give me 2 days. Come for 2 weeks to this workshop. And if you don't find anything there, I'll leave you alone. And I'll never say another word about it. And I went to shut him up. But on May 2nd, 2006, not January when I got out of treatment, on May 2nd, 2006, he walked me into a church basement in Trumbull, Connecticut, and something happened. And I cannot explain it any better than to tell you that I noticed, I experienced, I felt for the first time in my life a presence, a force that scared me and gave me hope at the same time. And they started to read out of this book, and everything they read started to make sense. It had depth, it had weight. And as they'd read these things, I would think, is that what that meant? How could I have missed that? That's an instruction? That's a prayer? How could I have missed all of these obvious things? Christ, I studied English literature in college. I don't know how much of my dad's money I spent in the 5 years I went to college, never graduated, but I figured I knew how to read. Now I don't even know that. But this group taught me what it is to recover, what it is to have this foundation. They didn't just tell me that lack of power was my problem. They told me why it was. That I have this not two, threefold condition of a physical allergy, excuse me, which means that I will have an allergic type reaction every time I ingest these chemicals. And I say allergic type because it's different with alcohol and cocaine and heroin, but they all have the same type reaction. It is an allergic type reaction, an abnormal reaction, not your typical usual reaction. That when other people are stopping and other people have had enough and other people they're going to get sick if they do any more, or they slow down because they got to drive, or they start saying some very strange things like, I've had enough. I don't need any more. I don't know, what planet are you from? I don't know how to say those words. I was always using with the expectation of arriving right where I wanted to be. It was all, the promised land was always just a few drinks, a few lines, a few hits away. Always. And nobody else was like that. So I had this allergic reaction that would keep me, every time I started to use, keep me using. But I also had this mental obsession that when I stopped using for a period of time, would convince me that I had no such allergy, that I can somehow, some way fool the past. I can figure out a way that it won't end the same way. And I had managed to get myself to that point of giving in to what became an obsession. An obsession is a thought which overcomes all other thoughts. I gave into that obsession because of that spiritual malady, that I was restless, irritable, and discontented. Like I said, everything hurt. I was a raw nerve. All of those things I mentioned before, times 10. I was all of those things. And I how much time do I have left? Oh, I got plenty of time. Okay. They taught me that if I had this threefold condition, that the only solution to that was a power greater than myself, providential in nature, that had the ability, that had the power, if I turned to it and relied upon it, would come between me and the first drink or me and the first line. And I had to believe in that. And a doorknob couldn't do it. A light bulb couldn't do it. My dog couldn't do it. None of those things could do it. It had to be a providential power that had that ability. And I went to look for that. And I mentioned, when I had this experience at 16 with acid, I had seen and experienced God. Well, this time was a little bit different. This time I began to understand what it meant to be in touch with that power. See, page 55 of our book taught me where to look. I'm looking all out here, all around every place, every church, every building. That's not where he is. Page 55 taught me that God is a fundamental idea of God that exists inside every one of us. Every one of us. And my job was to clear away the clutter that had accumulated on my soul, to let that power out. I'd heard people say about letting God in and going to get God and bringing him into their life. And the book told me he's already there. The word that Bill used is innate, which means I am born with that power in me. It was just a question of recognizing it's there and clearing away those things that have been ruling, controlling, and dominating me adversely up until then. And I realized I never had a single problem that wasn't tied into one of three things. I'm angry as hell about something, scared to death about something, or I'm filled with guilt and shame because I've done something that I don't want you to find out about it, and I'm afraid you're going to find out. So if that's the case, the things that have been piling up on my soul that are blocking God from getting out are my angers, my fears, and my sources of guilt and shame and remorse. And so in my fourth step, I made a project of identifying each time I had an anger, each time I experienced fear, each time I experienced that guilt and shame, and put it through a process to understand what mistake I made, because I realized that at the core of every problem I ever had, as my friend Bill Cleveland says, it's me. Oh my God, it's me. And that was a difficult one to overcome, but I realized that's the one common element in every problem I ever had. It's always me. Oh my God. And if that was the case, I then had to look at those thoughts of self. In the book, it tells us that we're ruled, controlled, and dominated by this 100 forms of fear and self this and self that and self. But what does it look like? When you tell me that selfish self-centeredness is the root of my problems, I need more. What does that mean? That sounds great. Make a great placard, make a great T-shirt, but what does it really mean? And the four-step inventory taught me what it meant. It meant that if I made a decision based on one of the manifestations of self, one of those 100 manifestations, I was frightened, I was irresponsible, I was dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, judgmental, all of those things. And when I made a decision based on that as the motivating force of the decision, I was in collision. I was in conflict spiritually, mentally, and physically. Because you see, the problem with self-will is everyone's got it. I got my playbook, but you're playing out of your playbook, and they're different. So every time I try and exert myself on you or another situation, what happens? You push back. I step on your toes and you say, get off. You just stepped on and we identified those toes, those basic survival instincts of life. Self-esteem, pride, relationships, so many of the ambitions, so many of these things I interfered with. And so you pushed off. And when you pushed off, what do? I retaliate by getting angry, fearful, acting in a resentful manner. In other words, I get resentful. And when I'm resentful, I drink and I drug. So if the actions of my life are lousy, drinking and drugging, then in order to change those actions, I have to find what action, what thought of self set this chain of motion and events. And I realized in my fifth step what a frightened, irresponsible, inconsiderate, dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, judgmental individual I had become. And in my sixth step, I look at that handful of defects and say, I do not want to be that person anymore. I'm starting to develop a reliable foundation of my recovery because I'm seeing how one step builds on the next, and what we do in that one builds on the next, and that builds on the next. And I think I have a pretty logical mind, and this makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. So I looked at that handful of defects that I was in my sixth step and said, I don't want to be that way anymore. I paid too high a price. Every time I made a decision based on one of those things, I always wound up in the same place, in trouble. So in order for me to change my actions, I have to change that thinking that led to the actions. And so in my seventh step, I'm given this neat little formula for how to do that. That every time I run into myself, I was to stop. I think one of the most underrated, unpaid attention, unacknowledged words in our book is the word pause. It is so important. Pause when we are in doubt, unsure. Pause. And what do I do when I pause? I invite God in. Because where God is invited, God goes. So I invite God in, knowing that anytime I invite God into a situation, the dynamics change immediately. I may not see it and know it right away, but they change, and it's just for me to recognize it. So in the seventh step, I ask God to help me be the opposite of that defect, which is to act on the asset. If I'm being dishonest, I'm asking God to help me be honest. And then with his help and all of the willpower at my command, I act in an honest manner. Because the book tells me just to the extent that I do as he would have me and think he would have me, does he humbly match my calamity with serenity? Quid pro quo. I will get what I put in. If I don't put the effort in, I'm not going to get anything. God will do for me what I couldn't do for myself, but he won't do what I can do. And if I can identify the opposite of those defects, then I can start the process of change. And having done that, having gotten right in the first three steps spiritually, in 4, 5, 6, and 7, getting right with me up here in my noggin, and in 8 and 9, I got right with you. I was then given these 3 steps for continued spiritual growth, these 3 steps that form my unshakable foundation. And I know you've all heard it because the name of the group is based on it, but I want to read that section of the 12 and 12, which I'm sure, as you know, is on page 98, because it says there's a direct linkage among self-examination inventory, meditation, and prayer. Taken separately, these practices can bring much relief. Just like going to 90 meetings in 90 days will bring relief. We're not offering relief. Sorry. We're offering freedom. And why settle? Why would you do that? If we're offering you freedom, why would you settle for momentary relief that ends the moment you open that door and hit the outside world? And you don't get it back, if you're lucky, until you come back to that room the next day. So we're offering relief and benefit. And it goes on to say, but when they are logically related and interwoven, putting them together like a bouillabaisse, like a stew, they are interwoven. The result is an unshakable foundation for life. And I've added 2 words after that, and freedom. That's our pathway to freedom, not relief, freedom. Putting together those 3 things. When somebody relapses after a period of sobriety, I think we ask the wrong questions. We ask, you just stop going to meetings, you stop talking to your sponsor. I don't think that's the right question. I think the question to ask is, how much time did you spend in improving your spiritual life through intensive work one-on-one with other alcoholics? Oh, none? Oh, okay. How much time did you spend each day in inventory? I'm sorry, what was that? Not much. Oh, okay. How much time did you spend each day in prayer and meditation? Not much again. Guess what? You were destined to relapse. It was only a question of when. That if I don't maintain this unshakable foundation, and that is daily, of inventory, prayer, meditation, and intensive work with others, and that is not, P.S., that is not going to meetings every day. If you go to meetings every day, you should be finding newcomers to work with every day at the same time. Otherwise, we're stealing. We're stealing recovery. We're going in there and we're taking what's being offered and we're hoarding it to ourselves. And this, what makes our recovery program work is that it's based on giving it away. We can only keep it by giving it away. We have to go to the mind every day. And let me just, I see we're running late on time, so let me just wrap up with the way I usually like to do this, with a story and a statement. The statement is, I believe everyone here, we are very special people. We've been blessed, yeah, I said blessed, with a condition, the treatment for which, the recovery program for which, stands to make us better people than we ever thought possible. Think about that. That which we had or have, and that which we never thought possible. All through the God-given grace of the 12 steps of Cocaine Anonymous. It is, as Bill Wilson says, an opportunity, not a guarantee, an opportunity not to be missed. And the story is, the young girl with her family spent their vacation in visiting the great cathedrals of Europe. And she was very taken as she stood underneath the stained glass window, bathed in warmth and light as the sun was shining through it. So she asked the tour guide, who are those people? And the guide said, they're the saints. And when that little girl returned home to school and the teacher asked her what she did on her vacation, she said, I saw the saints. And when the teacher asked her, what do you mean? Who are the saints? That little girl, in her magnificent innocence, said the saints, they're the ones who let the light in. Now, I believe God got very tired of seeing us die from this disease. So he set in motion through saints here on earth, people like Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob and Fitz Mayo and Ebby Thatcher and Dr. Jung and Dr. Silkworth and Hank Parkhurst. And those of you who know me know I can go on for an hour giving you the names of the people who brought us where we are today. But if God worked through people then, he most certainly works through people today. If he worked through them then, he works through them today. So he put in my life that guy who dragged me to that meeting. He put in my life Joe and Charlie, who became my big book sponsors and mentors. He put in my life every one of you people in this room have played a part in my recovery. And if anything I said in any way passes along the slightest little flicker, the slightest glimmer of any of that light that was given to me, if I passed it along to you, then I've done my job. I've done what God wants me to do. So thank you for having me. We'll see you next time around. Peace.
Okay, so first up we've got Amy. Come on in.
Right, I'm Amy. I'm an alcoholic and addict.
Hey, Amy. How you doing?
You know,
Good to see you.
I'm okay. Well, I'm starting a little bit of pain, but it's my own fault, you know, and I've just been on phone to my sponsor. I'm in a rehabilitation place and my step 3 is not solid. I've been willing to let God in, yeah. I've got no using thoughts, but I've not been letting God in, and I've been picking up on all behaviours. And I've sat on pain today, and I thought my sponsor, well, I was thinking about putting on my step 4, but you know, I spoke to him tonight, and you're sitting in this pain what I'm sitting now, because yeah, I might be changing in some ways, but my old behaviours are creeping back in. You know, and I haven't taken it to God. Instead, I've just took it all on myself. You know, and that's what I do. I always I take my will back and I run with it. You know, instead of going to God first or going to my sponsor or to somebody, you know, to anybody else but me. That's what I seem to do, and I seem to keep doing these behaviours. So I've been put right back to the beginning of stages that I'm in. And I was, you know, my pride and ego absolutely got smashed today. But, you know, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. You know, when they say God only does for you what you can't do for yourself, that's exactly what he did. Because I've done this for a few times, and this is what takes me out of the door. You know, and then, yeah, I might not have no using thoughts right now, but if I carried on doing this and acting the way I have been, I'd probably find myself back out there again. You know, and, well, there's no doubt about it, I would be. So, you know, I'm just thankful I came onto this meeting tonight. And yeah, I'm sat in some pain now, but I'm exactly in that pain where I'm supposed to be. And I need to relook at my step 3. And I need to remember to keep letting God in and not keep taking back my own life, because, you know, if all behaviours don't change, nothing will change. But I'll just leave it there and say thank you.
Was there a question in that anywhere, Amy, by any chance? No, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Howard. Thank you. I was just going to remind everyone, so the time is dedicated for questions. But thank you so much, Amy, for coming in. Lawrence, do you want to come on in?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Lawrence Addict. Yeah, thank you very much for that, like, really powerful share, Howard. Yeah, I got loads of identification. Like, I've collected a lot of 90-day chips myself, and you know, definitely would concur. Like, my foundation has been pretty shaky. There's the few things that really jumped out from your share, which were, you know, you were talking about some things that happened in your childhood, and then you spoke about you know, your partner getting really ill and you getting really ill yourself. And you know, I've experienced like similar things that you were talking about. And I was wondering, with those things that happened more recently, you know, did you ever feel that, like, you know, your God or a higher power or whatever was punishing, you know, was a punishing God? Because this is a problem that I have, you know, and I know in some ways it's like tied up with self-pity, but even when I try and move away from self-pity and look at it, I think, like, all right, there's got to be a lesson here in all this pain. I don't know what the lesson is just yet, but like, the lesson will come. But I think it challenges my relationship with my higher power to think of it as punishing, even though I know it's supposed to be loving. And so I was just wondering if you had any advice on how I can like challenge that idea, or like what you've done maybe, or what your experience has been to reshape that perception.
Mm-hmm. Well, for one thing, read that paragraph that I read that Young's based this meeting on. And I can answer your question with 2 words, well, 3 words: prayer and meditation. I went through a period a couple of years back where, ironically, it was in that period of my 10th, 11th year. There's something about that barrier that creeps up on me. And I was in a funk. I was in a depression that I couldn't even name, but my wife identified it. And I listened to a tape by Mark Houston, who said that at 9 years sobriety, he was touring the country teaching people how to be sober. He was opening up rehabs, and he checked himself into an insane asylum because he was thoughts of committing suicide. Why? Well, when he went into treatment, he took one book with him, his big book, and he asked God, show me in this book, please guide me to what I'm not doing. And the words came to his mind of prayer and meditation. And when I heard that, I have my answer too, because I wasn't meditating the way I think it was effective. My way of meditation was to keep my channel open all day and watch for the answers. They could come through a billboard, through something you said at a meeting, but there's something deeper, more profound, more useful in meditating. And thank God for Kathy, for my wife, who taught me how to meditate effectively, how to find that peace between, almost like I can hear the electricity in the room that I'm sitting in. That pure a connection with energy. So when you ask what can be done, prayer and meditation, prayer and meditation, prayer and meditation. Saved my life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your question. Just to let you all know, just so we can squeeze everyone in, we're just going to reduce the question time to 1 minute. So next up, we've got Michael. Come on in.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Howard. As always, you never fail to disappoint with your delivery on these matters. I used to think that an unhealthy spirit was talking about gin or vodka. I never realized until well into my journey of AA that my own spirit was what they were talking about and how unhealthy it was. And I'm so grateful that you separated those 3 parts, those 3 very distinctive parts of our disease. But there was one part that you mentioned. You said an innate or born with feeling that this God is with us. I don't find the word innate anywhere on 55. Could you direct me?
Yes, certainly. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was part of our makeup. Part of our makeup. It's innate. You see that? Middle of the page, 55, paragraph 3. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup. That was innate. As far as I'm concerned, it's already there. We're born with it. We don't create it. It's not given to us. It may be obscured by pomp and worship of other things and calamity, but he's there. Does that help, Mike? Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Michael, for your question. Tim, next. Come on in.
Thanks, Ella. Howard, thank you so much for a wonderful share. My name's Tim. I'm a recovered addict. Howard, what would you say to someone who knows he's recovered but still has fear and trepidation around the thought of sponsoring others?
Could you give me that again? Someone who the phone interrupted me. I apologize. What would I say? If somebody who what?
Somebody who was recovered but who still has fear and trepidation around sponsoring others.
Oh, we don't have a choice. That's like saying, I've worked the steps, but I got a lot of fear and trepidation about the fourth step, so I never really did it. You can't. You have to do that. And that step, working with others, is part of our 12th step. It's the bill we get. And the 12th step is 3 parts: a promise, a charge, and a challenge. The promise is, if you do this work, there's 11 steps that precede this, you will have this spiritual awakening, a change in personality sufficient to recover. But then we're handed a bill. We're being charged. Nothing in life is free. So we're being charged with the responsibility to tell people of our experience and to help them to have the same. Don't worry about fear and trepidation. They're going to die out there. You can only save their lives by bringing them to that point. These people are going to die. You've been given the power to stop that. What are you doing about it?
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tim, for your question. And next up, we've got Danny. Come on in.
Thanks, Ella. My name's Danny. I'm an addict. And Howard, thank you so much. Always good to see and hear you, my friend. My question is, Howard, in the third step, it talks about, just after the prayer, talks about that we were ready to abandon ourselves utterly to Him, to God. How has God revealed to you over the years areas of your life that you haven't been ready to abandon to Him? Thank you.
One of the things I tell my people, my sponsees, is at night, the last thing you do before the light goes off, before the head hits the pillow, is ask yourself, where did I see God today? I saw God today and He's there. You know, I could say, and you got to stay up till you find Him, but He's there. And I'll tell you where to look. Think of the conversations you had with the people in recovery today, because that's where I see God. I see God right here today in this meeting in half a dozen places already. That's how I do that. I see God and I acknowledge Him, and at night I thank Him for that day. But I don't take it for granted. God, I saw you today. Thank you for showing up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Danny, for your question. Next up, we've got Serene. Come on in.
Hi, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Francine. Grateful to be here. Thank you, Ella, for taking the meeting, and Young for sending out the invitations. And Howard, Howard, I have a question, but I want to thank you first for being part of my recovery for years
Oh,
now, and
thank
I
you.
appreciate your teaching. So thank you so much. When you shared about relapse, I too have people coming to me going, I don't know what happened, right? And you told those 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Could you repeat them, please?
Well,
Please.
it's actually 3 questions. How much time did you spend each day deepening and enriching your spiritual life through intensive work with others one-on-one? I know it's a long one, but how much time did you spend each day deepening and enriching your spiritual life through intensive work with others one-on-one? Not going to 90 meetings, sitting next to the same jamoke each meeting. That's number 1. Number 2, how much time did you spend each day in prayer and meditation? And number 3, how much time did you spend each day in inventory?
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Serene, for your question. And lastly, we've got Dave. Come on in.
Hi, Dave, alcoholic addict. Howard, thank you very much for your chair. It was absolutely amazing to hear. Just in relation to what you just shared back, those three questions, intensive work with another alcoholic, inventory and prayer and meditation. I've noticed in the past when I've gone back out there, prayer and meditation becomes stagnant and I start losing that and it's taken me out the door previously. So a question I'd like to ask is, what does your prayer and meditation practice look like? So I like to hear other people's so I could try new things.
Well, I'm going to slip in a cheap plug here. On Sunday night, we have our Big Book Comes Alive Step Study Workshop. We're now, I think, in the 15th or 16th year of doing that. And God has given me that. But be that as it may, either this Sunday or the next Sunday, I forget which one it is, we're going to be talking about and having a group meditation. I'm going to teach how to meditate. We did it last year, and the power of 150 people meditating for 25 minutes was staggering. Staggering. So either this week or the following week, come to the workshop and we'll teach you how to meditate. It's so simple. So simple. Okay?
Beautiful.